we are Legally Sis. Welcome to our podcast.
The information provided in the show is for general informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal advice on any subject matter. No attorney-client relationship is created between you and Duran and Duran Schultz Law.
Hi, welcome to Legally Sis. I'm Attorney Wen.
And I'm Attorney March. Welcome to our podcast. In this episode, we will be discussing about illegitimate children and the rights of the illegitimate children, their parents, particularly, of course, the mom and the dad. So, Attorney Wendy, when can you consider a child to be illegitimate?
A child can be considered as an illegitimate if he or she is born from a parents out of wedlock, meaning that the parents are not married at the time of conception and at the time that he is born.
So just to clarify, if the child is born within a valid marriage, then the child is called legitimate. Just for the purposes of our viewers, we have to define the relationship, or what we call in legal terms, the relationship between a mom and a child, or a dad and a child. So this is called filiation.
Yes. Filiation is important, especially in cases of intestate or testate successions. So this is the period wherein the heirs or the children of a particular parents are entitled to the inheritance of their parents.
Right, okay. Before we discuss those filiation issues, like how to prove if you really are the child of another, let's discuss first the rights among these three very important persons. Okay, as an illegitimate child, what are your rights?
So, as an illegitimate child, you still have the rights like of a legitimate children. So, you have the right to be supported by your parents. Support meaning, or it comprises of everything for the sustenance, such as shelter, transportation, food, education. Your parents being not married at all, they should be supporting that illegitimate child. So, another aspect that the illegitimate child is entitled to is to use the surname of the father.
So, what if the child is not yet recognized by the father? Will that affect the right or the obligation of the father to support the child?
Well, in order for a child or a legitimate child to be entitled to support by his legitimate father, the filiation of both parties needs to be proven before the court. So, it's not automatic that the illegitimate child can ask or demand for the support from the illegitimate father, especially in cases where the illegitimate father is impugning or saying that he's not my child at all.
Right. But if the father recognizes the illegitimate child, then yes, of course, it's automatic that these type of like support, financial aid, education should be extended if the father is capable
Yes.
to the child. How about the mother? What are the mother's right when she has an illegitimate child?
Well, basically, first is the right for that illegitimate child to use the surname of the mother.
Yeah.
So, under the family code, it is provided therein that the child should be under the custody of the mom, and he or she is entitled to use the surname of her mother primarily.
Primarily, that would mean there is another option to get a different
Surname, yes, especially in cases or instances where the father has allowed the illegitimate child to use her surname. So, that child has the option to use his surname.
Yeah. We've discussed previously about the change of name and correction of name. So, assuming that the father has not recognized the child yet, how does a birth certificate will look like for an illegitimate child?
For the illegitimate child, the first name will be filled out. The middle name will be left as blank. And the surname will be the surname of the mother.
How about the custody? You mentioned that if the child is illegitimate, the custody will primarily be under the moms, right? And then if something happens to the mom, who's next?
If something happens to the mom, the custody will delve upon the grandparents or the parents of the mother. Next to that is the siblings of the mom who are above 21 years old. And the next in line are those appointed by the court, like the guardian.
So it looks like the father is not in that
Any
line.
mentioned at all, no.
Was not mentioned at all. So what are the rights of an illegitimate father then?
Rights of illegitimate father, well, he can still ask for the custody, but basically is the visitation. He has the right to visit his child, especially if he is acknowledging that that is his child. And then if he wants to have a custody or fight for a custody of that child, then he can petition the court or the proper court for the custody be given to him.
Okay, going back to the rights of the illegitimate child, when it comes to inheritance or intestate or testate succession, could you please walk us through how the legitim or the right to inherit, how it is different from a legitimate child?
Okay, basically, illegitimate children are entitled to one half of the whole portion of a legitimate children's legitim. Meaning, if there is a legitimate children of both the parents, that illegitimate child shall only be entitled to the half of that share.
So what if the mother dies ahead and the grandmother is still alive and then has something to give away or has an estate? Will the grandchild be able to inherit also?
Yeah, actually, there's a case which has been recently decided by the Supreme Court regarding that. Under Article 992 of the Civil Code, it states there that an illegitimate child has no right to inherit ab intestate from the legitimate children and the relatives of his mother or father. So, meaning under the old rules, that illegitimate child is not entitled at all to get anything from his or her grandparents. That is the ironclad rule, they say.
So, going back to our example, the child is illegitimate because the mom didn't get married. And then the mom died ahead, and then the grandmother on the mother's side is still alive and is able to give away or has an estate to give away. So the grandchild, even through the mom, will not be able to inherit from the grandmother.
Well, that is under the old interpretation of the 992. But in the recent years, the Supreme Court has explicitly revisited that provision of the law, meaning that the children or the illegitimate children of non-marital parents, they could be considered or that they will be entitled to the legitim or right to represent their deceased parents from their grandmother. So technically, the court differentiated whether that illegitimate child is conceived of a parent who are married or not married at all. So if the parents are not married, well, basically the child is still illegitimate. But with that provision or interpretation of the Supreme Court's decision, it's saying that that illegitimate child, which is born from a non-marital or non-married parents, they could inherit from their grandparents.
If there is no impediment,
Yes.
if there's no legal impediment for those parents.
Well, that's another avenue.
Wasn't that the way the Supreme Court decided?
Well, the Supreme Court merely said non-marital or the illegitimate children of a non-marital parents.
So you mentioned about the intestate and the ironclad rule. So if it is intestate, meaning there is no last will and testament, either holographic or notarial will, and the child is illegitimate, that child cannot inherit inherit from the grandparents.
Provided that the parents are not married or they have no legal impediment at the time of the conception or the birth of that illegitimate
All
child.
right, okay. So centering on intestate, right? That's the intestate. If you have a child that is born out of wedlock, then to ensure the future of the child, to ensure that the child would have inheritance, then make sure that the child would inherit out of a last will and testament.
Yes. Actually, that's one way wherein the legitim of an illegitimate child can be of par with the legitim of a legitimate children. So, meaning to say that since the illegitimate child are only entitled to one half of the legitim of a legitimate children or child, the parents can craft a last will and testament, and that there is a portion there which we call as a free portion wherein the parents can dispose freely that portion of estate, and then he can give it to the illegitimate child.
You mentioned about being at par or being in equal footing as the legitimate children. If that is your intent, why not just adopt the child?
That's another option or another way in order for the illegitimate child to be of equal footing with the legitimate children.
But this assumes that the other parent would give up the rights.
The parents could be, the illegitimate child could be just considered as illegitimate by reason of the parents are not married at all.
Oh, correct.
So, in order for that illegitimate child to be legitimate, then the parents can get married.
Can get married. But that would be legitimated. But if there is legal impediment at the time of birth,
that child cannot be
never legitimated. So that's a situation wherein the parents are the same. The biological parents are the same. And both of them would be able to adopt the child. Assuming the circumstances on legitimation is not available. So if the dad or the mom is really different, then one of the parties, one of the parents would have to give up their rights as to the filiation to the child.
Yeah.
Right? So the option to make the inheritance of the illegitimate and the legitimate to be on equal footing would be to put them in the will.
Or through adoption.
Or through adoption. Because through adoption, the child would become legitimate.
Yes. So he will be entitled to whatever rights of a legitimate child.
We have received a number of inquiries from the website. This is with regard to mothers with illegitimate children and wanting to travel abroad or even migrate abroad. Is it necessary that the father's consent be presented so that the mom can travel with the child?
Under the family code, an illegitimate minor child shall be under the sole custody of the mother. So if the mother wants to travel with his or her illegitimate child outside or abroad, then the only consent that needs to be shown before the immigration officer is that of the mother. So it's not necessary that the father shall give a consent.
So even if this mom would want to bring the child abroad and permanently stay there?
Well, yes. Technically, yes. The mother can still get the child out from the Philippines and migrate to another country without the authority or the consent of the father.
Although in certain circumstances, for example, the Australian Embassy and even the US Embassy, we've received requests for us to draft legal opinions stating that the custody of the child, if the child is illegitimate, will fall under the mom. I think the embassies are just trying to be careful so that there is really no issue when the mom would want to travel or even migrate from the Philippines and stay in another country.
Yeah. But I guess it's also on case-to-case basis of each countries
Yeah.
with respect to their immigration policies.
So, unfortunately, that is one of the drawback of being an illegitimate father, because even if you love the child and you didn't marry the mom, or there is a legal impediment for you to marry the mom, since you don't have custody, the mom, if you part ways, not amicably, the mom can easily yank the child away from the dad,
Yeah.
which is common in the situations that we've handled. Remember, there was this client who had an issue. They had a child, but they weren't married, and now the mom is going to get married already and has been threatening to not let the dad see the child.
Yeah, but for that instances, we still encourage the parties or the parents of that illegitimate child to come into an agreement or settlement with respect to who has rights or their particular rights to that illegitimate child. Because remember, it is of the paramount or the best interest of the child to grow with both parents along his side. So because a mother cannot provide specifically what a father can provide and vice versa.
Right.
So in that situation, the parents should be able to, just rear and care for their child, even if the parties are not in good terms.
Yeah. Because the relationship between the dad and the mom is different from the relationship between the dad and the child and the mom and the child.
Yes.
Is there a possibility that the child be adopted by the mom if the dad absolutely does not consent to the adoption? Or other way of putting it, is it necessary that the consent of the dad be taken before the child can be legally adopted by the mom?
Well, for adoption, that's a separate discussion
right.
already. Yeah, because there is a procedure for that one.
Okay, stay tuned for that one. It would be one of the topics that we will be discussing because the adoption laws has recently changed.
Yeah.
Okay, that should be all.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.